Hello, hello, welcome back to Let's Talk. This morning doing another edition of Let's Talk H.P. Lovecraft, but before we get started, just want to remind you to please subscribe to our channel and help us grow. Our goal for 2019 is to get up to 750 subscribers, which will put us well on our way to our eventual goal of 1,000 plus subscribers. This morning, talking about The Street by H.P. Lovecraft, written in late 1919, around the end of World War I. And it was published in December 1920 issue of Wolverine Amateur Journal. This is a sort of linear short story from the perspective of a street, the street, of the name of the story. It's presumably in New England, possibly Boston, sort of the areas that dominate most of Lovecraft's life and many of his stories. The narration expresses the sentiment that some people believe that places and things have souls. The street begins in colonial times as sort of a path to the local watering hole. It eventually becomes lined with cabins, and those cabins give way to colonial area and industrial revolutionary era, sort of your typical large white mansions with picket fences and rose gardens and trees, and basically an echo of, or Americanized echo of, I would say, English life. But the Indian Wars and the Revolutionary Wars come and go. These palaces, these mansions rise up, and they're filled with sort of the first generation English settlers. The flag of the land changes from England to the colonies to eventually the United States. The street, the houses, like sort of watches as men in different uniforms come and go. First the red and blue of the Revolution, and then the blue and the gray of the Civil War, and then eventually the olive drab of World War I. After or during sort of the World War I era, by that time the soldiers are wearing sort of that olive drab look, and the town the town has become run down. In fact, it's actually part of the largest city now, and this is no longer the sort of the decent area of the city. The English occupants have given way long ago to an influx of mainly Eastern European settlers, and supposedly they are launching a plot to overthrow America and to overthrow the city. But then, before they can do this, for unspecified reason, the street kind of collapses. I think you could say that it was a storm, and it'd be a good argument for that. But I think it's more like the idea that the soul of the town, of the street, has seen enough and has decided to give way and to destroy itself rather than to go in the direction that it is headed. Immediately after the collapse, an observer sort of has this vision in the moonlight of above the pile of rubble. Here is the old street in its heyday with the large mansions and the rose gardens and the trees, standing there forever, sort of in another plane of existence, sort of as a ghost vision. And that is the only supernatural element of all, at all, in this short story by H.P. Lovecraft. Just a quick analysis for you here, guys. The story is beautifully, plainly written, but it is haunting, and it is, I would say, one of my favorite H.P. Lovecraft stories so far. It's not among the stories by Lovecraft that would have been considered the most popular. Those would definitely be the Cthulhu stuff. But I think a lot of these smaller, lesser-known stories are actually among his best as far as prose style and as thematic material. There is a racial element, but that aside, I think everybody can relate to the idea of the nostalgia of the place where you grew up and seeing it change as the people change and the old residents go, and then the economic conditions change, resulting in many of these places sort of falling in decay or being replaced by newer structures that lack the classic feel that you relate to. I can feel this a little bit around the small town that I grew up in, but my mother and then her parents before them could definitely see that because it was once sort of in the same, the back half of the time period that this guy's talking about. That town sort of existed, and even up until probably the 50s, 60s, it was, I mean, even maybe 70s, it was a beautiful little town, but just things have changed in the world since then, and it's sort of run down now. Back to that racial element, it does deal largely with this this idea of the changing makeup of the population. It'd be easy to pass this off as being simple racism, but I think that nostalgia element is a larger part of the equation here. And nobody likes change. It doesn't matter, it's easy to scapegoat people racially, but ultimately it's the change that people don't like. People fear change, and in many cases the change does not feel like it's for the better, so it's easy to assign the blame to the new people. And then if the new people happen to be a different race, okay, you say the race, but you actually don't, it's not necessarily the reason. There's more going on as far as economically and socially. It's obviously, there's a huge element of this story that is about sort of the rising fear of communism, sort of post-Russian Revolution, and then it would continue on actually after Lovecraft's life, even into the 50s and 60s with the McCarthy era and things like that. Yeah, there's this huge sort of interwar communism fear, sort of the Red Menace plot element going on, this idea that these so-called terrorists are planning to overthrow the American government. And there were some terrorist activities in Boston at that time, so this could be an inspiration. But even if you brush that aside a little bit, we all know that there was quite a bit of hysteria at that time, that a lot of it was not founded. People were being called out and being feared of, oh, you're trying to destroy the American way. But of course, you have to remember that the American way is not always the best way for all people at the same time. So there are people suffering. And so you have this street long past its glory years, and the people who moved out and gave up on the street, the people who moved up into bigger mansions, into skyscrapers, they're as much to blame for abandoning a place as for the new people who can now afford it because of its lower property values and rents. So we're all part of this world. It's easy to descend into racism, and I can definitely see some of where Lovecraft comes from, but I think it's some of his fears are legitimate, but just not for the reason he thought they were legitimate. Back then, I think it was very easy to assign the cause of your fears to the race, but I think it's the change is what really frightened him. And I think change frightens all of us to some degree, some people more than others. And it's an issue that we still fight with today. I hate to make this descend into a political thing, liberals versus conservatives, but you see a lot of that even today in America. It's gotten to the point where it feels like it's hysteria, but it's actually the blame game is getting to a smaller and smaller point. Originally, it may have been racial, and then it's become gender, and then it's become class, and then it's become all these different descending themes to the point where it's Trump rallies where you have a group of sort of conservatives preaching unwanted fears over immigration at the border and the need for a border wall that won't really work. When there's other ways to deal with the situation, which is showing more humanity towards each other and being a better neighbor and a better member of the world community, so that people don't feel the need to run and hide from drug wars in their home countries, and those drug wars are at least partially fueled by America's insatiable need for drugs. So we're all part of a world community, and like it or not, we are at least partially to blame for the things that we fear. All right, guys, hope I didn't preach there too much. Hope it didn't wander too much, but this is The Street by H.P. Lovecraft, written late 1919 at the end of the World War I. Published December 1920 in Wolverine Amateur Journal. I don't know if anything else he ever wrote was in that journal. As I continue my exploration of H.P. Lovecraft, most of his stuff was in Weird Tales, but I'm finding a handful of stories were in these other amateur journals that, we're lucky they survived to be collected here in the complete H.P. Lovecraft, which I am working my way through. Plan on doing a review of every single piece of H.P. Lovecraft fiction, probably before the end of 2019. So keep an eye out for that, and to be sure that you are alerted to my next video, please subscribe and ring the bell. That way you will be the first one to know when another video comes out. So thank you once again for tuning in, and I will see you again soon.